Hello, everyone. This is Nick Gazer, and welcome to another town hall event focused on our strategic planning process. This one is a little bit different in that we're welcoming members from all three societies together to join this town hall to talk about cross-society objectives. Before we get into that, a few logistical details that can help out. The structure of this town hall will be broken up. There will be three different components to the town hall. The first one will be an introduction and vision structure section. Talk about how the cross society objectives came about, how they're working together in and amongst the strategic plans. The second section will actually go through the cross society objectives one by one, and then the third section is going to be brief, but it'll be talking about next steps and ways to engage in the process as well. I'm joined in this webinar by our three presidents from across the three societies. We have Dr. Ole Wendroth, Dr. Sean Kepler, and Dr. Sylvie Bruder joining us today, and they'll be of great help in providing some of the context and thoughts specifically as to ways the individual societies can work towards their own objectives, but then they talk about the ways we can work together more and more going forward. In addition to the structural components, I would ask that you could feel free to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation. We will have breaking points throughout those three different sections that I mentioned earlier for your questions. Please use the questions function. There's a little questions box in your taskbar for GoToWebinar. Please submit your questions at any point through there. And we'll have these dedicated stopping points, and we'll work with Susan Chapman to connect to those questions and make sure we're listening to your input and hearing your questions and answering your questions. And should we, as we're going through the town hall, should we not get to your question, we will follow up individually. And the recordings from these town halls will be posted to the member websites and the discussion boards after the fact as well. So if there's something you missed and you want to go back, these will be posted after the fact as well. So with that, I'd love to welcome our three presidents. If you're here if you're available to just say a quick hello and any thoughts you have going in, and then we can jump in.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Ole Wendroth. I'm president of the Soil Science Society, and I'm working at the University of Kentucky. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sean Kepler. I'm president of the Crop Science Society of America, and I'm at the University of Wisconsin. And thank you all for tuning in to help with this important process.
And I'm Sylvie Bruder. I'm ASA president, and I'm at Purdue University.
Thank you all. So let's jump into the town hall. The first section is I'm sorry I got cut off, but the first section is a little bit of a reminder as to how we work together as societies and where we come from an access support perspective. So each of the individual societies are distinct, and where the staff are headquartered within Access, the Alliance for Crop, Soil, and Environmental Science Societies, is working together to help provide services to the three societies and Agronomic Science Foundation. Within this structure as well, we have, and this is a little bit of a repeat, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the cross-society objectives, and I would welcome our three presidents to come into the conversation at that point to talk about where these cross-society conversations originated with last year in the strategic planning process, and how we could think together on these. Just maybe a couple comments in a few minutes. But in repeat from the last month, we have the three individual societies with their independent strategic plans that are largely board-led in the strategic visioning process as to what's included in the plans and the areas of emphasis. We also have direct member input. We've had a number of surveys. We've had a town hall events at the annual meeting. We've had these virtual town hall events to try to gain input and a number of other tactics as well to receive member input. And the intent is that these strategic plans are very strong, and they provide strategic guidance to the individual societies to support the members and the advancement of science respective to the individual societies. Going forward, and this is where I'll pull in and maybe ask the three presidents to provide a few perspectives. Pulling out of the start of the strategic planning process last year, a survey, and then the grand challenge, or the meeting in June in Florida, and there are a number of different elements that were identified in which the societies could work together. And as we were working through the strategic planning process, we went as far as to articulate what these cross-society objective areas could be. So these would be areas around membership, science, education, discoveries, diversity and inclusion, leadership development, external engagement, publications, policy, and just thinking about business models to support the science societies, but also our members and other key stakeholders across the societies. But I'll pause here for a second and would ask from any perspectives from Sylvie, Sean, or Ole as to your thoughts on the cross-society objectives, how this might be a little bit different than where we've been in the past, but also what your hope is, and as we move forward, how we could utilize these cross-society objectives.
Well, I'll start. I think they just to say that they were a logical outcome of mutual discussions amongst the societies in terms of some things that were common objectives to all three of our societies. And some of them you'll see are probably common objectives across other professional societies as well.
Yeah, this is Sean Kepler. In the recent past, a number of our societies had overlapping objectives. We had usually separate strategic plans, and then there was integration of those plans at the headquarters level. So for instance, with publications, there was a publication infrastructure that supported all the publications in the societies, even though individual societies might start new journals or have certain initiatives within that. And so I think, one of the things that's developing this year, our meeting in Florida last year was one of the first ones in a long time, I guess, where all of the boards were together at the same time. And that led to these cross-society objectives that are kind of happening during the planning stage as opposed to the implementation stage as they were in the past.
Yeah, and to give you one example of existing big cross-society activities, so I would say one of the biggest ones is the congressional visits. So advocacy, that is a very strong component of our three society objectives. We don't reinvent the wheel here. The three societies are interacting already for a number of years, and we feel we have, it's a double or it's a triple win situation that we have from these objectives. And remember, besides those cross-society, of course, each society has its individual objectives. Don't be afraid when you read the word business model. So we are not turning into a business. So science is our highest goal, but business is there because, of course, everything, all the services that we do, we need to generate revenue for it in order to provide those services for our members. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for your perspectives and individual context, how we're thinking about across society objectives and supporting individual societies, but they work together. Just to move through a little bit more, this is again a reminder as to repeat from the past town hall that we have, but in addition to the cross-society objectives that originated out of the plan last year, it was the Grand Challenge, work in the Grand Challenge area that was developed with input from a member survey, and also.
Can you hear me? This is Susan. You're getting a lot of reverb all of a sudden.
Okay, I will change my microphone. Is this better? Susan, can you hear me?
That is not better.
I'm sorry, I cut off my phone call earlier. If I could have just 1 second to call back in, hopefully that'll be better. I'm sorry for this.
Okay.
I'm sorry for that delay. I was cut off from my phone call, but hopefully this is working better and the echo is gone.
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Sorry about that, everyone. I apologize for that technical delay. So as I mentioned, the Grand Challenge originated out of a membership survey and then the work in Florida to advance that. And that's separate but definitely related to the strategic plans, dotted line connections between those. Going forward, from the staff level, and this is supported by Access, we have our individual departments working towards implementation of the individual strategic plans, the cross-society objectives, and the Grand Challenge, working in resourcing, forecasting, and the very specific actions to support these objectives. But along with it, it's also in the review and assessment. Within the review and assessment place, we want to make sure that the strategic plan is strong, but it's also part of our regular lives. And we're coming back to this as a living, breathing document throughout the process to evaluate, to tweak, and remain current with what's happening around us. Partnerships and collaborations show up in not only the individual strategic plans of all the societies, but within the cross-society objectives as well. And these are thought of as enhancement tools for individual collaborations and partnerships to leverage collective strengths across individual societies or other external partners as well to advance work towards our missions, our visions, our strategies that are identified in the cross-society objectives or the individual objectives in the implementation stages as well. And just a brief recap here from the expected outcomes coming out of the strategic planning or some of the outcomes originating from this process are thinking internally and externally towards inclusivity and diversity, culture of innovation, really connecting with members or other key stakeholders internally to thrive off your energy and open it up and really think about different functions and enhancing existing functions going forward. And as Ole mentioned, yes, we're not turning into a for-profit business or anything like that, but financial security of the societies are incredibly important in maintaining the ability to provide you services and help to advance the collective work that we have across each individual society and across societies as well. And from that external perspective on the outcomes moving forward, it's connecting again with recognition and connectivity, partnerships, awareness, thinking to different ways we can influence different sectors internally and externally, and ultimately create the impacts to agricultural and environmental outcomes through these collaborations, through these partnerships, and ultimately cycle back and really connect to advancing scientific literacy throughout society and hopefully gaining broader support for scientific advancement and development. And so with this, I will we'll pause here just with the comments from each of our presidents and just this recap of how we're thinking about working together visually. But I would open it up to any of your comments and perspectives on how this is similar or maybe even a little bit different than where we've been in the past. And would welcome your thoughts and comments here as well. So Susan, are there any comments or questions even up to this point in the introduction and how we're thinking about working together? Susan, are you still there? All right, we may have lost Susan, so I apologize again for these technical difficulties we're having in this town hall.
I'm here. I'm so sorry. I had my mute on. I was talking to you all.
Oh, all right.
There is actually a question on where the cross-society objectives came from.
Oh, sure. I think we had some comments from Sylvie, Sean, and Oli on that in the process, but actually, let's if I could turn it to you three as well, because you're part of the June meeting, you're part of the early strategic planning process, in the three boards coming together, as Sean, you've mentioned. I can provide recent perspectives, but it might be helpful to refer back to the June meeting that you were all present at.
Yeah, this is Sean. So at the June meeting in Florida, like I said, all the boards got together and we did have breakout sessions with the various societies and identified some themes, and we came back together and discussed some of those themes. And there are certainly things like publications and member services and diversity and those types of things that came up in each of the society discussions. We do have our board meetings coming up, our individual board meetings. They're all going to be virtual now due to the travel restrictions, but we're going to evaluate more as individual societies, again, these cross-society themes, and then identify the priorities and the specific elements within each society. I believe moving forward, it's still a little bit under development, but it was really out of that meeting where we were all together that we identified kind of these commonalities across the societies in our planning process.
So the only thing I would add to that is that in the previous, when we were going over in the previous town halls, the society specific objectives, those had already been discussed within a board meeting. This time the cross society objectives, we have not had the opportunity. We will be discussing them during the upcoming board meetings in May/June, depending on which society. So your input will be valuable, but you also have to understand a bit that this is not, we haven't been through this with all the boards. And so I think one of the things you'll see is that there's some redundancies in there that I don't know that we've ironed out yet.
Right. So these cross-society objectives were indeed born in a very, I would say, in a least defined state at the Tri-Society strategic planning meeting last summer, and it is actually one purpose of this webinar to have members' input. So I want to remind you the whole strategic plan, also our initiation with the first big meeting last June, all those were nourished by membership feedback. We had the survey last year in March, and then we generated questions, and then the grand challenge, and then following along with that, we then met, and one of the components, I think they were not mentioned before. So for our society, the Soil Science Society, one of the big topics was also perception. So yeah, so we have this webinar to get your feedback, and what we have generated so far in terms of objectives was born within the three societies and put out. So now it's our work to combine these, and it's not any boards, or of course the boards have to technically put these together, but the ideas, they come from our membership.
Thank you. Susan, it might be helpful, I think, just looking at the time to jump into the objectives, because there are a number of them. There are 10 that we are going to walk through here this afternoon, or this morning and this afternoon. So I may just keep going, and then we can cycle back to the questions from the attendees based on how the presentation continues. So from that perspective, I'm going to read. What I'll do is walk through about half of the objectives in the first section, repeat it, and then it's going to be a little bit different. I'll open it up to comments on the first 5 because there are so many, and then we'll do the same thing with the second 5. Come back and I'll read through them. I'll repeat them, and we'll open up for questions at that point as well. So it's a little bit different than the previous town halls for those that have attended, but we do want to make sure that you have the ability to provide input, because your input in guiding these is very important, and this process in itself, as has been mentioned by each of your presidents, is very important in moving this ahead. But as Sylvie mentioned too, these and Sean as well, these do need some refinement, and your input in that refinement process is very helpful, as Ole mentioned as well. So I'm going to read through the first several, and we'll take a break and listen to your thoughts and comments and questions and address those, and then move on. So objective 1 is really focusing on the grand challenge. Build a movement, work jointly to create or support at least 6 collaborations or partnerships with other organizations for implementing the shared grand challenge. The objectives 2 through 4, the second objective is focused on inclusion and diversity, increase service to underrepresented scientists, and increase representation in ASA, CSSA, and SSSA. And then objective 3 is around external awareness, increase investment and external awareness of the societies and member impacts by 500% through strategic communications and marketing. Objective 4 is around external engagement, and this is increase external engagements, for example, collaborations, partnerships, sponsorships with new organizations by 100%, and existing sectors by 50%. And then I guess I will read through these as well, and then we'll go back and cycle through the first 7. Objective 5 is around membership needs and services, improve membership service offerings, customer health, scoring, and engagement. Objective 6 is develop, pilot, and launch a career-long professional development program. And objective 7 is focused on publications. Improve publications exposure and journal usage by 10% within 2 years, and by 3% year over year after. And then also to improve impact factors 5 to 7% annually. So I'm going to go back and I'll reread those and then open it up to questions. Objective 1 is focused on the grand challenge, building a movement to work jointly to create or support at least 6 collaborations or partnerships with other organizations. Objective 2 is on inclusion and diversity, increasing service to underrepresented scientists, and increase representation. Objective 3 is looking at focusing on external awareness, increasing investment in external awareness of the societies. And then objective 4 is external engagement. So a little bit different focus here on increasing external engagements, collaborations, partnerships, sponsorships. Objective 5 is on membership needs and services, improving membership service offerings. Objective 6 is working on developing, piloting, and launching a career-long professional development program for all different segments of our membership base. And then objective 7 is on publications, improving publications, exposure, journal usage, and impact factors over the next several years. So with that, I continue to encourage you to use your questions box and submit your questions and your comments on these initial objectives. And Susan, do we have any questions coming in at this point? Susan, you're on mute again if you are talking.
All right, we'll leave the bar open so I can see that. Yes. We don't have any questions yet. We encourage everyone to ask questions about all of the objectives? Oh, looks like we do have one that's come in. It's around objective 3, about the external awareness and engagement. What does that look like? And 500% seems like a pretty big increase. How is this derived?
Yeah, so these,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that is objective 3 and kind of relates to objective 4 as well. But the 500% increase in communications and marketing, that number was, so this is focused on communications, marketing from an external perspective, having placements in various media sources, whether it's public media or different specific media outlets that would target individual sectors like agriculture or the industry, different types of industry sectors, the policy sector. And this is really around developing strategic communications and marketing programs for that. The 500% number was based on investments in our communications and in our marketing. Our investments across the societies up to this point have been relatively low. Typically, I think on the order of 2 to 4% of our gross revenue, society to society, which is pretty low in the society or broader nonprofit space. So this was looking at some of those numbers and thinking about ways that we could make some investments and try to enhance our impact and awareness. So that 500% number may sound really, really big, but it's focused on more of that resource capacity as to what the investment would look like, but also the disproportionately big impacts it can have for modest investments on the front side. So that's a little bit more information there.
Great. And another question that has come in. What is the difference between partnerships in Objective 1 and the partnerships in Objective 4?
That is a good question, and it's related to the point that Sylvie brought up, that there is some redundancy built into these right now that needs to be worked out and refined, and Sean brought this up as well through the board discussions. The partnerships in Objective 1 are specific to the Grand Challenge statement that we have shared across the 3 societies, but it is also in a dotted line connection connected to the external engagements more broadly. So the partnerships in Objective 4 may not be completely specific to the Grand Challenge. These might be in areas of membership. It could be publications, could be sponsorships, could go a number of different directions. Our annual meeting, through joint partnerships in our annual meeting or smaller level conferences. So I would say Objective 4 is a little bit broader than just the Grand Challenge statement. The Grand Challenge in Objective 1, for additional context, will be guided by a task force to help support that, and that's looking like, at least the concept has been approved by the 3 boards, and we're still refining exactly what that looks like. But it likely will have both internal and external representatives on that task force to gauge where we go forward and how we build the plans and implement work towards the Grand Challenge. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful, but would open it up to any comments from Sean, from Ola, and Sylvia as well.
I think one of the things that we have acknowledged to ourselves is that when this gets drilled all the way down through to the things that we will actually be doing, we may then loop back and refine the objectives because they're quite broad. There's a lot of overlap, and they don't seem all that specific. But I think once you see specific tactics and activities underneath them, it will be these objectives will become more clear.
Right, I agree with that. So this first objective you see is strongly linked to the Grand Challenge. That is basically how in that development process. We got the train going slowly, but whoever pointed us at that difference in partnerships, yeah, we certainly need to refine things and will need to avoid repetitions and rather clarify 7 objectives is a large number. So we have to see whether we stay with that or reduce it. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan, are there additional questions for these objectives right now?
There is one more question. We have leadership development in place. How does this connect, excuse me, to Objective 6 on a professional development program?
Yeah, I appreciate that question as well. And Objective 6 is looking at enhancing, actually it directly connects with what Sylvia and Ole just mentioned in terms of the tactical elements. This will be defined for the implementation steps, largely at the staff level as well, to help refine what this actually means. But the initial thought is to enhance what's happened with leadership development, to extend this out and create service offerings for members at different stages in their careers, recognizing there are different needs and wants at different stages, different developmental steps, whether you're a student at an undergrad level, a grad student, an early career member, mid-career, late career, but also thinking to different sectors you might be in, especially as we leave the grad school life or the student life and into the professional life. There are different sectors, and within different sectors, whether you're working at a university, working in government, or working in industry or a public policy role or otherwise, there are likely different needs in those different positions as well. And this could build out connections to help provide services not only at different stages but within different sectors that could help people advance in their careers.
Susan, could you remind me, what did the question from our member, did that include, or was that question about leadership or professional development in general? So I think if I remember correct, that question was about leadership. Yes, we have an established leadership program. This objective number 6 is a little more general on professional development programs in general.
Okay,
that's a good point, Ole.
Sorry, those are all the questions we have at this time.
Okay, well, we'll continue on with the last few objectives. And these questions are great. Keep your questions coming in or your comments as well on these objectives, whether it's the ones we've read through or the ones we're going to move into next. As has been mentioned, your input into this process is critical, especially as to how we define the specific actions that support these objectives and which objectives are important to you going forward. So looking at objectives 8 through 10, and this is where we'll stop it today. Objective 8 is around business development and growth, exploring new and enhanced revenue sources leading to pilot investment into new business growth areas. And again, this isn't to turn us into a for-profit entity or anything like this. This is thinking about ways that we can enhance the financial security of the society going forward, to provide additional support to you as members, to provide additional support, say, to our science policy office, to our communications, to all the different offerings that we have across the societies to serve you as members, but also to advance the science and the influence of the science, a translational effort to connect and see full utility in the science. Objective 9 is around partnership through meetings, expand influence and impact of multidisciplinary science through joint meetings with other scientific and professional societies. So we've seen a number of examples of this in the past, and it's historically, and it's asking, or I guess it's focusing on enhancing that going forward. And then objective 10 is on science, policy, and influence. Enhance influence to support agronomic, crop, and soil science through education and information. And this is initially focused at the federal level, but there could be connections based on a lot of effort at the state level as well, or influential states that could be mapped out for engagements there. And as has been mentioned a couple different times, the tactical elements really help refine these. And your input as to what's important to you here across all of these objectives is really important to how we decide what gets prioritized and what the specific actions would be to take to support each of these objectives. So with that, again, business development and growth, partnership through meetings, and then science, policy, and influence are objectives 8 through 10. And Susan, if there are any additional comments or questions, we can take them here before we move on.
Yes, actually, around objective 8, what are examples of business development and growth? We're a science society. Should we be a business too?
Yeah. So this is pretty vague. I have a couple of thoughts, but I'm wondering if Sylvie or Sean or Ole, if you have any thoughts as to objective 8 before I jump in.
Yeah, certainly. This is Ole speaking. In our preliminary discussions, we had this question definitely as well. Because we are a science society, we are not a business or organization. That's a very important point. The business goes to a point only that we need to be financially flexible, that we can provide services that not necessarily generate revenue. That's one important aspect. And another important aspect is we need to consider our sources of revenue strongly, and they change all the time. So just look at publications. The publication revenue is really a moving target. It is very hard to plan with what the revenue is and what resources will we have available to be spent for other items. With the government changing the boundary conditions about open access, that makes it very difficult. On the other hand, you can also see how successful our 3 societies run that publications part, that business part, so to say, that we have a very high standing in the academic world. We have top journals, so we want to maintain that status. And so yes, science is on our front burner, and in connection with that, there comes the business. Thank you.
So let me just add a couple of words, because I do think the word business is a bit confusing. We are a member services organization, and we have provided for meeting venues, scholarly communication via pubs, and the other source of our revenue is membership fees, and that's what makes us sustainable. I think the goal is to continue to be the premier scientific society and to uphold the standards of the science and to provide venues for scholarly communication and professional growth and development. I think what we're looking at is, are there services in addition to publications? Publications, as Ole said, is extremely complicated right now, and it will, if you've been listening to some of the discussions around what's happening with open access, and now perhaps with COVID-19, the drive to open access is in full steam ahead. I just talked briefly this morning with Carl Anderson about a couple of calls I've been on with the OSTP and their plan for requiring everything to be open access, how they're going to do it. But note, it is not whether they're going to do it, it's how they're going to do it. And there's some serious implications for our publications here. And we need to consider a lot of different things, including, this is across all professional societies are considering this. What's the new business model? So that's where the business model term comes from. What's the new business model for scholarly publication? Because the old one, subscriptions, pay to read, is going away. Will it be only pay to publish? Will it be some mixed model? And then we as a society are going to have to figure out not only how to survive, but to thrive.
Thank you both. Sean, do you have any thoughts here, or did the coverage from Sylvia and Ole cover it pretty well?
That's right. Yeah, covered plenty. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. Susan, are there additional comments or questions coming in here?
Not at this time.
All right. Well, at this point, the next section of the presentation is to move into next steps and just to show you where to engage and how to engage, and talk about a little bit about how to engage in the next steps of the strategic plan process, refining these cross-society objectives, refining the individual society objectives, but also on the ways that we can share in how it's implemented. What are the specific actions that are important to you? What are the areas that we need to emphasize and enhance going forward? And then, especially as we work through the implementation process, how do we review and assess that? So we're continually monitoring throughout the strategic planning process, having tangible points in time to come back and ask, how is this working for you as members, to provide needs for you or services for you, and advancing scientific discourse and moving forward with the advancement of robust science at a whole level. So definitely feel free to keep your comments coming in and questions, and we'll open it up here in a few more minutes to open to a broader open discussion. But continuing forward, there are a number of different places you can engage in this process, and we strongly encourage your input. And it's looking to your board member representatives for your different sections, and definitely reach out there. But there are also a number of other places. Your committees, your editorial boards, providing comments and questions to them, really at the entire organizational level, your divisions, your sections, your communities, your leadership there, your participants there, having the discussions with them as well as to what these objectives mean, specific to your society that were covered last month, and these cross-society objectives, what these could mean to support your work at various levels. Definitely continue to use the discussion boards. It's been a relatively recent switch to the discussion boards, or movement towards the discussion boards, to have hold our conversations, to have the forums, the discussions there that can be longer in time duration and could be referred back to in the future. So definitely go to your discussion boards, and those discussion boards will be where we post post a full draft strategic plans for your review and input. That's also the place that we've posted the landscape analysis document historically. And then thinking to these other places, social media, we're going to have some campaigns to reach out and ask about some of the comments here. The mentoring program, specialty groups, and especially I shouldn't leave out the headquarters staff. Don't hesitate at all to reach out to the headquarters staff. We'd love to hear your input. We love to hear your comments, your questions, and work with you in advancement of these strategic plans, but just in general to provide services to you as members across the board. So across all of these, don't hesitate to reach out, and especially remember that the headquarters staff, we're here to help support you going forward. I would also, maybe I could open up here for our presidents as well, as to ask, where has it been helpful? Where have you heard engagement in the past? Where have you held the discussions with board members or otherwise? Are there some of these that you would like to emphasize going forward, or are there other places that are not on this list that Sean, Ole, or Sylvia you'd emphasize here as well?
Yeah, one thing that comes to my mind, it's at a very scientific level, that is closely related to the previous slide, objective 9. So we see here, especially social media and other groups where we can engage ourselves. I think it is essential that we engage ourselves in creating meetings, scientific meetings, smaller meetings, larger meetings, besides our big annual Tri-Society meeting. This partnership through meetings that can really bring you forward in terms of knowledge and exchange. I'm speaking from our own experience. It were these additional interactions, besides being advised by my graduate student advisor and by my peers, graduate students, I gained a lot of knowledge, information through joint meetings. And I'd like to encourage you, so it's all on our websites, but if you have an idea, regardless what level of career you are at, and you have an idea you want to organize a conference, please please contact our headquarters or contact your division chairs or your society's board members, and then ask them for closer information. Our headquarters is very experienced in the logistics of organizing conferences of all sizes and can easily help you. And there's also funding for organizing conferences. So time is short in your scientific life, in your daily life. There's a lot of time you can spend on discussions and on exchange. So in order to get organized and focused, try to create events where you can expect some possible outcomes, such as a joint paper or as, yeah. So those are the events that I recommend to engage and to enhance the science. Thank you. That's what I wanted to say.
This is Sean. I think we also anticipate that as the Grand Challenge process moves forward, there will be more and more ways for people to engage in that. So that's a little early in the planning process, but I think there will be lots of opportunities to engage with that process.
Great points. And Sylvie, do you have anything to add here, or I can move on otherwise?
Go ahead and move on.
Sounds good. I have just one last slide. It's kind of a timeline. And what we're looking at is we have throughout April and May, we were focused on input, board member conversations, prioritization, and this will carry forward as we've discussed through June, July, even through the remainder of the year, to the board meetings in June for ASA and soil science. We're going to have crop sciences board call actually next week, as has been referenced. We'll have a virtual board meeting, so that's going to be interesting. And there are certain elements that I'm actually looking forward to a little bit there, and certain elements that are a little bit different and going to be challenging. But we'll have the discussion there to advance the conversation around not only the specific objectives that were talked about last week, but really these broader set of cross-society objectives as well. We've been working with crop science initially on prioritization, and we're going to do that also with agronomy and soil science coming up in the near future. But just a sequence of events, things that are going on. Conversation around the Grand Challenge Task Force. We'll pick that up later in the summer and moving really a lot of that conversation to the annual meeting and planning that way. So this will continue. We will continue carrying on with the conversations. We're hoping to finalize the strategic planning process between this month and with crop science, and next month with agronomy and soil science, so that we can begin really jump into the implementation steps. And that's again where not only the strategic plans themselves, but also in the implementation, those specific tactical elements that are important to you, where your input is critical. Your voice, hearing your voice in that process is very important to ensuring that we have a society that supports you as members, and supports the advancement of your science moving forward. So with this, Susan, I would maybe ask if there have been any additional comments or questions that have come in as we were talking about where to engage or this next step slide. And I would turn it to you, Susan, then we can open it up one last time before we close the webinar.
Thanks, Nick. I didn't have any additional questions, but I did want to remind our audience that right now we are doing committee and reviewer signups. So you should have gotten an email last week, and a reminder will be going out in the next couple of days to direct you to sign up for committee appointments, which will be done this summer for 2021. You can also sign up for your division and specialty groups through my account. Just log in or give us a call, and we're happy to help you with that. And also, Nick, you mentioned the discussion boards. Everybody should be getting a daily digest of the posts that are happening to the discussion boards, and you're able to interact, log in. You only have to log in one time, and then interact and post within the boards.
Thank you, Susan. Those are great reminders. Oh, Oleg, go ahead, jump on in.
Yeah, I'd like to add one more thing to that. So I think I speak for the leadership of all three societies, and also including their boards and division heads. So in this difficult time, we really appreciate what you are doing. Working in science and in education is working with people, and we all understand and know, we experience that is made extremely hard right now. And we appreciate that you are giving your best in order to maintain it. As part of that, I'd like to remind you that currently our abstract submission for the Tri-Society meeting in Phoenix this fall is open. So please consider submitting your abstract. And remember, you have seen a message from Nate Erisman, our director for meetings. Don't worry too much if you think you will not be able to collect sufficient data to have a full, complete presentation. We all know, we are all sitting in the same boat. We all know this year is a non-normal year, so don't worry about that too much. Besides presenting your science, and be it at an intermediate stage, it is also convening with your colleagues. And we don't know yet how everything will turn out, but we ask you to seriously consider submitting your abstract. And how everything will turn out in the future is not known, because we can only plan from day to day. But that's what we need to do. And we would appreciate your consideration of being part of that Tri-Society meeting this fall. I know headquarters puts a lot of emphasis into organizing that, a lot of thoughts. So yeah, that's my repeated invitation to you all, and I look forward to seeing you. And one day we will see each other, I'm sure.
Thank you, Ole. Sean and Sylvie, would you have any closing comments before we close the webinar?
I'll just add that. Go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say I don't have additional comments. Go ahead.
No, the only comments I have is that if you have sent me comments on the previous webinars, I will be taking those with me when we have taking them with me. I will be including your comments when we have our board discussion, our next board discussion. So thank you very much for those who emailed me, if you're on the call.
That's a great point. And a reminder going forward that there are many ways to engage to make sure your voices are heard in the strategic planning process, and we're taking active steps to include all those inputs in the discussion. I've been working with Sean in reference to the crop science board call coming up next week to compile that information, to have all the different all the inputs, and they are many, into the strategic plans, and your voices are critical in that effort. And similarly, working with Sylvie and working with Ole to prepare for the agronomy and soil science board webinar, board virtual meetings in June, we'll be compiling all those inputs to ensure that we have the strongest plan possible with representation, with your voices leading that, with guidance from our board members and others throughout the society. With this, I want to thank you again. I know it's not easy to jump on another webinar, but again, your input, your questions, your comments is critical to this very important process, and I really appreciate your time and attention in supporting us going forward to build stronger societies into the future. So thank you, and we'll talk soon.